What is going on, everybody? Welcome into a very special NFL draft episode. We're about 3 days, 4 days from the NFL draft. We've done mock drafts galore, the positional rankings, but those day three prospects just get a little swept under the rug sometimes. And I was sitting here, I was like, I really want to talk about some day three guys, some of my guys, and who better than EJ Snyder to just have on and talk about our favorite day three guys that we'd be pounding the table for. So I pinged you. You had a little window to come on. Thank you for joining us, EJ. How you doing?
I'm good. It is full go right now. It is dead sprint. We all know this. It will be over when the draft is over. But until then, it is pretty much a day ending in Y in which I'm working 12 to 15 hours. So let's hit it.
Yeah, over 5 days after the draft is over, maybe.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We lie to ourselves and say it ends after the draft, but we know
right,
that.
right. Well, EJ of the Bootleg Football Podcast, of course, everybody definitely, if for some reason you are not keeping up with everything Brett and EJ have been working on over there, definitely go check it out. You got a few days left to binge everything over there. I definitely have a couple episodes to catch up on myself, but you guys do amazing work, and we're really happy to have you. But the format for today that I kind of thought would be fun would just to be kind of go position by position and just think of a name that if we were in the GM chair, day two is coming to an end. We're out of picks and we're just praying that these guys can sneak into round three of the draft. And, if we're a scout in the room, we're pounding the table like, hey, we gotta take this guy. This is my guy. So I figured I'd let you serve first with the first quarterback that as a kind of day three-ish, I just said within reason would be there on day three. So I'll let you go first with a quarterback for us.
Yeah, I'll definitely be cheating in a couple of positions and saying, boy, I hope these guys make it to 100. But if they don't, I've got a backup plan. In terms of quarterback, it really comes down to one name for me, and that's Jordan Travis from Florida State. If you're talking about a day three quarterback, you're not talking about a presumptive starter. You're talking about someone who needs to come in, be smart, know his role, be adaptable, and win a spot start if he can. Be a good backup, learn the system, be athletic enough that you don't have to change the game plan. I think if you're thinking about all those things, Jordan Travis is an obvious choice. He's a solid backup right now. We got a chance to talk to him at the Shrine Bowl. That interview's over on the channel. Really, really composed guy. We got to talk to a lot of his teammates as well. So we got to ask them about him, which is always a good sort of window into, he said versus he said. And it all lines up in terms of the Florida State guys. They love that guy. They were very sorry to lose him at the end of the year. But he is a very smart guy, works very hard, sees the field really well. Smart, he's accurate, good movement skills, and he's not going to be coming into town. Like, obviously all athletes want to push it, succeed, and be the starter, but he's not going to come in knowing that he has a presumptive spot. He's going to be fine sitting in the room, working with your other quarterbacks. And my guess is whenever Jordan Travis gets on the field, we're going to see some decently solid play out of him. He is smart with the football. He doesn't make terrible choices. He can drive the ball. I like that he's got repeatable mechanics, and he's probably going to be available, definitely day three. I would say somewhere in about the 100 and pick 130 range. Mm-hmm. And to me, if your backup quarterback sucks on your current team, that is a completely palatable cost to be able to have a better than average chance to win a game if your starter goes down.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And like in terms of a backup quarterback prospect, like the guy I'm going to talk about has a lot of limited tools. I don't know that Jordan Travis is like super physically limited. I wouldn't say he has like a rocket arm, but he is kind of one of those day three guys where, maybe something does click and you have he's got the mobility and the arm talent. So he is a really fascinating day three guy. I'm glad you went with him. So I did write down Michael Pratt, and I could talk about Michael Pratt. He's a solid player, but I'm going to go a little deeper than that. And this is like round 6, round 7, but it's someone that nobody talks about. He didn't even get a combine invite, but I did not hate his tape as a backup quarterback, and that is Taulia Tagovailoa out of Maryland. Look, he's got his warts, man. If he ends up starting, you're kind of just like basically he turns the ball over a lot. I'll put it that way. So if you're starting him, you're kind of hoping, okay, we don't, it's like a wild pitcher where you're just hoping this is the day he's throwing strikes, But there's a lot to like in his tape.
Mhm.
I think he watches his brother a lot and really models his game after Tua and has a lot of those things that we like about Tua, which is like he's hitting the top of his drop, throwing with anticipation. He for the most part is reading the field well, understands the coverages he's getting. Now that's where some of those interceptions come, where he's like, and that's the same thing with Tua, honestly. But he thinks he's getting one thing, he gets another thing, and he forces it over the middle, throws it right to a linebacker, whatever. But man, I really thought the anticipation, the way he broke down the game, and then just a lot of the kind of game management stuff he does that you would be looking for in a backup quarterback that can step in. He's got that great cadence at the line of scrimmage. He, like, every game felt like he was drawing someone off sides, getting that free play, kind of manages the pocket well, can feel the rush, extend plays. So I really felt like his tape was pretty solid. I get why he didn't get invited to the combine, because he's not going to come out and, have these Joe Milton 60-yard bombs, because he does have a pretty weak arm. But I would hate to say if there's a Brock Purdy in this draft. I don't think it's Taulia. I liked Purdy more, but there are some similar traits. And in terms of, you put him in a Shanahan style offense, I think he can kind of run the show and, be a pretty solid backup in the league. So I wanted to give him some love. Certainly.
It's tough. He's smart. He's competitive. We got to see him at Shrine Bowl. Kind of a tough situation. Wanted to go back to Maryland. NCAA said, So he's in this draft, for better, for worse. And, but there are things on his tape against quality competition that you go, ooh, I could work with that. I need to see it more often. I need to see it more consistently. I need to see less of the stuff I don't like, which is what you say with almost every quarterback. Right. Maybe more in certain cases with Taulia, but I'm with you. There are definitely things when you watch his tape that make you think, okay, like I could roll with that. And if we're talking Brock Purdy types in this draft, I think that's Austin Reed. And Austin Reed, again, super limited arm, Western Kentucky. Really good anticipation, but just didn't have a lot of velocity. Know the quarterback coaches he's working with, and they said he added 10 miles an hour in training.
Wow.
Which is a lot for a quarterback. So, if you imagine like Austin Reed tape with a little more zip, that's pretty interesting stuff.
Interesting. I'll have to give him another watch, because I didn't actually write him up while I was watching Corley, but sounds like that was a mistake. I'll check him out.
Well, maybe not just based on his college tape, but knowing that one piece of information, it's like, because that's the thing. Every quarterback has something they could improve, and hey, if he's already taken steps to improve that, all right, maybe worth another watch.
Okay, cool. All right, let's do wide receivers. Then we'll circle back to running backs. It's not the typical order I go, but everybody loves some wide receiver sleepers, right? Puka Nacua comes in as a 5th-round pick, breaks the rookie record. I'm not asking you to predict which 5th-round wide receiver is going to, go for 1,500 yards this year, but who are you pounding the table for?
Hey, I was Puka Stan, and we're talking.
You were.
June.
I got to give you
was
credit.
My guy. And it was all about staying healthy. It always was throughout his career, but it was really interesting to see a recent interview with Rome Odunze, because he was in the same room with Puka at Washington. And Rome was like, oh yeah, we knew he was a dog, like 100%. Like, we couldn't get on the field as young players, because he was out there whipping up on guys like McDuffie, who are really good corners in the league now. So fascinating story there. But if we're talking about an outside the top 100 wide receiver in this class, there's a lot to choose from, is the first thing. It's a very deep class. It's not like, the one guy. There's multiple guys we could choose here. I'm hoping that Jalen McMillan or Malik Washington slide. Now, Jalen McMillan probably not getting to 100, but he might. And if he does, I am all over that, because if you watch his 2022 tape, that is a well worth investment. Malik Washington.
That seems like a good over-under for him. For me,
yeah,
like 100, just because of how deep the class is.
Again, it's going to be pick your flavor, and some team, I imagine, will take a shot on him earlier. Again, they saw his 2022 tape as well. He was hurt a lot of this year, but you did see a spark when he came back for that Washington offense as well. So I would hope he makes it. Malik Washington is a guy we saw at the Shrine Bowl, and this entire process, he's been in the 120s, the 130s. Like, he's been holding really steady. And then, like, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, suddenly you start seeing him at like 95. People are like, oh, he did lead the ACC in receiving. I don't know. I think I could use that in the slot. So he's another guy. But if those two are gone at 100, I'm Tajk Washington all day from USC. Love me some Tajk Washington. If you've watched Caleb tape, you've seen a ton of Tajk. A lot of people sort of, I would say mistakenly, think Brendan Rice moved that offense more than Tajk did. Not true. Tajk was really a straw that stirred the drink, especially on the deep ball. Taj's contested catch percentage is really high, which is weird considering his stature. Not a prima donna. Gets separation. Yes, he is, I would say, slot only based on his frame, but he is a good slot at that. So he's still in sort of the 120 range, 130 range. I am all over that all day if I need a slot receiver.
Yeah, I think he's a lot of fun. He's the kind of guy that's just going to find a way to get on the field too. Reminds me a lot of Olamide Zaccheaus for the Falcons. It's just a very useful, not just a deep threat, but get him design touches and stuff as well. I'm going to go with someone I haven't talked about at all this draft process, and definitely not a guy that's going to like hit a home run and be a superstar, but someone that I think is going to have a very defined role for the right team that likes his skill set. And that's Jordan Whittington out of Texas, the fifth playmaker on Texas's offense. So, on one hand, it's like, well, he didn't get a ton of targets because they had a lot of mouths to feed there. But there were a lot of games where they're like, you know what? He's the guy we want to feed in this matchup. He had some really explosive games, but I picture him as that big slot, like Jawan Jennings role, like the Niners, 5th round. Grab him, let Jawan walk in a year, and then slide Jordan Whittington right back in there. Big slot that's going to work underneath. I thought he did a good job. Some of those like two-way goes, the push-offs at the top of his route to just create a little extra separation, because he's not the most like fluid change of direction guy, so he's going to have to be a little bit between the lines, I guess, with the rules to create some of that separation. But loved his run after catch. I saw a little bit of like Laviska Shenault in there as well, but I mean Jawan Jennings is a great comp for the run after catch stuff and the run blocking. This guy, it's like that. If you don't block, you don't get the rock, right? Like he knew that, and they rewarded him a lot of games. But a lot of those screens and swing passes they're running, he's out there just driving slot corners like 5-10 yards down the field. So, I mean, he's never going to be a 1 or a 2, and for that reason, he's not going to go in the first 100 picks or so. But in a lot of those offenses where they got those big slots that are kind of quasi tight ends, he seems to fit that role perfectly for me.
Yeah, it's about role for him. I think you do have to find the right offense and a coach that is willing to use him in that way. I do think, and we see this happen with lots of players, not just wide receivers, where a player comes in and the team doesn't have let's just say they have an overambitious design on what they want to do with that player, and it doesn't end up working out for them. But Whittington in a limited role, I could see it. I happen to know a lot of Texas fans. I try not to get too involved in college football for that reason. Too many opinions of local fans, and the same for, not reading like pro analysts lists before I do my own. Don't want to be influenced by that, but I do know some hardcore Texas fans. They do not love Jordan Whittington. So I have to admit I'm biased. No, he was just not the guy that a lot of fans chose. And again, we all know that's super fickle. That could be for any number of reasons, but I had that bias going into it. And again, in a realistic expectation of where you're going to pick him, which is down low, and what he's going to do for you. Yeah, sure.
Well, I can only imagine part of that frustration comes from you have, 2 first-round wide receivers, a second-round tight end, this great running back. And there were times where it felt like they were, funneling the ball to Jordan Whittington. It's like, is that really how this offense should go? So I could imagine that's probably where some of those frustrations come from.
For sure.
But yeah, hopefully the right coach can get him in the right direction. I would be remiss as well. I have talked about him, and I have no idea where he's going to go. And that's Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. I mean, dude, I was expecting like just no separation, super slow guy, just like just getting bodied down the field like Hakeem Butler was coming out. And that's not really what his tape looks like. Nope. He's kind of crafted this very unique route running and release package that works for his frame, where he has these like long strides. He's got good like acceleration, and then he uses his arms well, and he just kind of distances himself from guys, and these corners and safeties don't really know what to do with him.
Yeah.
So he's separating at Florida State. He's getting open a lot. He makes some insane catches, and it's like, you're telling me that's just not going to work in the NFL? I don't know. I think for him, it's more just consistency with the hands and kind of fully developing that sort of like my ball bitch mentality all the time. But I'm just super fascinated to see where he lands, how he's used. He's the guy in my top 15 that I'm like, I love him, but I have more than anybody on my list. I just have no idea if this guy's going to be any good. So if he were to be there in the 4th round, I feel like at that point, I got to gamble just to find out how this looks like in the NFL.
Yeah, he's the classic. It only takes one, right? Some team sees a role for him, and I went into the combine. That was actually we did an episode, Brett and I, on 3 questions heading into the combine. We each had 3 questions. I was like, I am fascinated to see Johnny Wilson's 40, like his 40 and his gauntlet drill. Those are 2 things, and he honestly aced both of them.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, now I got to look with different eyes, and I might think about it a little bit earlier than I would have.
Yeah. 4-1-1 shuttle too is like not bad for his size.
No, not at all.
Like I'm saying, he's got a little juice in there. All right, let's talk about some tight ends. If Johnny Wilson isn't a tight end, which I don't think he is, by the way. But some people could see it, and I can't really fault them for it. But yeah, who's your favorite kind of day 3 tight end, EJ?
I like this tight end class, not because it's a great tight end class, right? It is not a loaded tight end class. To me, it's a very interesting tight end class, and it's a tight end class for people that study the draft. Like if you only studied around 3 and stop, like you're not going to see most of these tight ends. You're going to see 2 of them, maybe. So it's a fascinating class in that way to me. And the guy that really sticks out to me as an underappreciated player and as an all-around player that has really interesting tape and reminded me of sort of a way back NFL player is Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. I like the way he plays. He is dogged in run blocking, and I would say crafty as a receiver. He reminds me a little bit. My comp has been a young Jay Novacek, and a lot of people don't remember Jay Novacek as a young
I'm going to
player.
raise my hand on that one. I don't know.
Yep, no, that's fine. And it really is about the way he moves, not necessarily the production or anything else. It's the way that he uses his body, especially near the sidelines. And I just thought, man, it reminds me of somebody. And it took me like 2 days to remember who it was because, again, not the most recent comp. But Ben Sinnott, I think, has grown on a lot of people because they are looking for complete players. There's not a lot of them in this tight end class. There's a lot of really good role players. There's a couple of more complete players up at the top. But Ben Sinnott's a guy that's going to be available after pick 100, who you could plug in as a number 2 right now. And if your number 1 goes down, you're not going to feel awful about it in really any phase of the game plan. Kansas State fans love this guy. Again, I try not to let that influence me, but like as I watched him and then I reached out to K-State folks to kind of double check my opinion, I was like, is he really good? Like he seems like he's really good. And they were like, he's amazing. And I was like, okay, seemed really solid on my tape watch. I was a little bit higher on him than folks. Feels like some folks have come up, but he's still outside that top 100. And I think, one of the sort of immediate values, we always have those players going into day 3, right? The night between day 2 and day 3, like who's left on the board. And Sinnott's going to be one of those players to me that's like first 15 off the board in day 3.
Yeah. So what's your like round grade on Sinnott?
I would actually be comfortable with him in the end of the 3rd if I needed a complete tight end, because after that it gets really tough, or you're going to get less in one of the categories. I think of it like sliders or a bar graph, right? If you're looking for everything over a certain level and you don't get Ben Sinnott, you're going to be waiting a while, and one of those bar graphs is going to be lower than you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally in stride with you. I got to him really late. I got to him like maybe 10 days ago. And I originally had him like above Sanders as like a 2nd round guy, but I wanted to watch another game just to make sure I'm not like crazy. And I do think like there's aspects of his run blocking like that just are unrefined because he's used all over the field, slot receiver, fullback, wing tight end. I think he has the size and certainly the like leg drive with the 40-inch vertical, 10'6" broad jump, like he's explosive. And like you said, like he's got the ability to be a real like do it all tight end. But just, I mean, he hasn't played a ton. He was a walk on and, you know, kind of was just coming off his first full year as a starter. So I think you're looking for more consistency in the run blocking and some of the nuances as a route runner, where especially like Sanders has some of that receiver nuance. But I mean, we saw some tight ends come off the board at the end of the second round last year that I think were much worse players than Sinnott. So definitely a name to keep an eye on. Like, I agree, very well could be there in the fourth, but if he's like this year's Brenton Strange and someone's just trying to grab a tight end because there's not a lot out there, definitely wouldn't be surprised. And I wouldn't even really fault the team for it. I think he's a really explosive, fun player. So I'm glad you brought him up. I'm going to go down to Tip Reiman out of Illinois. And I think he's getting overshadowed by Theo Johnson, personally. Both these guys had unbelievable combine workouts for just a pair of massive full-size tight ends. And, you know, I had already written up Theo Johnson before the workout, and most of my notes were like plodding, turns like a semi-truck, no foot speed, like poor athlete. You know, the long speed seemed fine on tape, but that workout to me from Theo Johnson was like a little bit of fool's gold, in my opinion. I just don't know that that's the athlete that we saw on the football field when the pads were on. Tip Reiman, to me, I think a little bit more just kind of looked, I know it's lazy, but just looked like a football player a little bit more when the ball was in his hands, just looked a little more, you know, ready to go with the explosiveness in his lower half and some of the footwork, the run after catch. Both these guys were severely underutilized in the receiving game. So they kind of fit that, you know, Dawson Knox profile of like, well, can he do more in the NFL? So you're drafting both those guys with the hopes, but by the sounds of it, Theo might be a guy that comes off the board in the second round and Tip Reiman might be there at the end of the fourth. And I'm like, I've got these guys ranked super close. I actually prefer Tip because I think at 271 pounds to have, in my opinion, a better athletic profile, at least on tape. I think he could be just one of those sleepers. We've seen these guys at this position that were just underutilized in college. And I think Tip was a little bit slow to like get the playing time and stuff as well. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, he's like my fifth round or even late four guy where I'm like, yep, I'll take a flyer on that player at this position group. That's so hard to find, guys.
Yeah, and if you're really looking for, you know, again, you're looking for particular skill sets. And if you're looking for run blocking, there are guys out there. I mean, I think AJ Barner's one of the better run blockers in this class, but I think that's all he is too. He's really limited in other
totally
aspects
agree.
of his tape.
Yeah.
But if you just need a blocker, get him late. You know, there are guys like Reiman. Reiman had 80 pass blocking snaps. Tight ends don't normally have anywhere near that many pass blocking snaps. Only gave up 2 pressures, so he's got that as well. The one thing I don't like about his game is that the contested catch for a guy his size is, it's about 25%, whereas Johnson's on the other side. I agree that Reiman moves better in pads on a football field than Johnson does. Johnson obviously tested better, but famously Penn State puts out mutants all the time. However, his contested catch rate is 75%, which is get it near him and he's going to pull it down. That's very useful. If I'm going to split the difference, I'm going to get Zach Heins out of South Dakota State, who was a tight end that played next to Mason and Garrett. And interestingly enough, during our interview with them, which came out today, incidentally on the Bootleg channel, they said he had the best hands on the team. And that's above the Yankee brothers, the wide receivers who might get drafted, above Isaiah Davis, the running back who's going to get drafted. They were like, they'd probably tell you that too. Now, he's not fast, but he is a great blocker and has tremendous size, 6'6", 259. And looks like an offensive tackle. Occasionally you're like, wait, what? Oh, no, that's a tight end. Just looks like an extra tackle out there. But in the red zone, great contested catch numbers, very similar to Theo Johnson's 66.7% of his contested catches. So a real red zone weapon. Again, not going to get out. His workout wasn't great, but looks good on a football field, knows how to use. I liked what you said about Reiman and just kind of has figured, and Johnny Wilson too, has just sort of figured out a way that works for him. That's Zach Heins to me. So,
but okay, there's one player I need to get your opinion on. And if you kind of believe in him, and that's Dallin Holker out of Colorado State.
I do. I like Holker.
It's a little bit of that. It's that Isaiah Likely, where like, I like everything you do, but you're 6'2", 240 pounds, and you ran a 4.78. Is this going to work in the pros? You know?
Yeah. And the cool thing about a guy like Holker is that, led the nation in receiving, 64 catches, 766 yards, 6 touchdowns. The stats aren't eye-popping on any of them, but literally any route you want to see. Like any way you want to see that guy catch a football, in traffic over the middle, down the sideline over the shoulder, on out routes, on in cuts, with guys draped over him, without. Like, he's got examples of everything. He's kind of the anti JJ McCarthy that way. It's like, if you need an example of what might work in your offense, he's got the full catalog.
Yeah.
He can show you. And again, you can't pick him and think, okay, and he's going to do all the other stuff as well. But I think of a guy like, not that I necessarily want him to go to Chicago, but Shane Waldron, who's the OC that came from Seattle and is now the OC in Chicago. Yeah. Really like 3 tight end sets. You can't use Dallin Holker in a 3 tight end set. Yeah, you just can't use tight ends at that point. Like, he's a valuable piece, but it's not if he's going to be the only one. The guy that I thought you might ask me about is Jaheim Bell from Florida State, because he's even shorter and he's even more versatile, but people get really hung up on tight end. Well, he doesn't have classic tight end size, but he's a little bit like you said Sinnott was, in that he's used as a fullback. He's used in motion. He's used as a blocker, true H-back. Occasionally they use him as an inline tight end, which is a little weird watching him line up next to John Wilson. And he's like, oh, he's the tight end? But super dynamic with the ball in his hands, really can break it. One of the few tight ends in this class that's got some real gas. I like Jaheim Bell a lot. But again, he's got to go to a situation where he's almost going to get used more like Kyle Juszczyk than he is like, a classic tight end.
Yeah. Michael Pruitt, Jonnu Smith, Gerald Everett, like that.
And it's funny because Everett followed Waldron to Chicago. And I'm like, oh, picture him Bell late if he's still there, and just slot him in for when Everett leaves, because that guy knows how to get guys like that open. And I think Jaheim Bell at this point has even more gas. So let's go.
He's a good football player.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do offensive line. Did you write down, like,
are you going to skip running backs completely?
Or running backs. It's I used to work.
You can't skip running backs for me on the program. That's not going to work. It's in my
blood.
I know.
What did you say?
You can't skip running backs for me on the program. That's not going to work out. I'm not going to let you off the hook there.
Take it away. Thanks for catching it, because I totally would have forgotten it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay. If we're going all the way to offensive line, is he coming back around the barn?
It's the former PFF employee in me, EJ. I just gloss over it.
Right. You gotta go in order. Running backs, again, kind of like the tight end class, not a ton of talent up high, but that doesn't mean there's not talent and really interesting players. So the dream past 100 would be Trey Benson. I don't think he's going to be there. I think he'll probably go off the board in the late 60s to early 80s. But if that happens,
I just want to say, I would be stunned if he wasn't in the second round, personally. He's so talented.
I think he's so talented. He's my RB1. So
me too.
I would be with you. Now, again, if he falls, I'm picking up the dollar that people dropped, but I don't think he will. So in that case, I'm going after Tyrone Tracy, converted wide receiver, playing running back. A lot of people think that means, he doesn't like contact. Nope. Highest yards after contact per attempt in this draft, 4.44. So 4.5 yards every time after he gets touched is bonkers. A lot of burst, really slippery running style. Again, he's going to be one of the players in this draft. I think that when he comes off the board, where he comes off the board, people are going to be like, who? From where? He did what? Like, a lot of people don't know Tyrone Tracy. When he gets on the football field, the fans of his new team are going to be like, oh, that's nice. That's a very nice RB2 right there. I could live with that. So Tyrone Tracy would be my choice. Originally he was a real steal in mock drafts. He was at 180 or something. I was like, okay, all day long, no problem. He has crept up steadily and is now just after the 100 mark. He's like 115, 120, which I think is much more in line with his value when you watch his tape. But again, just not really a household name. And even to people that study running backs in the draft, like, people, where do you have Tyrone Tracy? It's kind of a litmus test, right? And people are like, oh, running back 20. And I'm like, nope. Wrong.
Yeah.
He's better than that.
I'm a little lower on him, but he's like probably the guy where I'm most afraid of that I'm too low on him. I think I'm a little scarred, so I couldn't quite get past his like. He's a little more lanky. I couldn't. I don't know if I fully trust.
Oddly, because he doesn't have super choppy feet, which a lot of people love in a running back. He does stride a little bit more, but the thing that caught me about Trace's tape is I kind of got caught up in that too. I was like, oh man, I'd like to see him be a little more, whatever you want to say, active, violent, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back and I looked at how far he was going with those strides. And I was like, okay, he's not taking a ton of strides, but he is freaking covering ground. Like he is breaking angles. And I was like, okay, so he runs different, but he's still fast. I'll take it.
Yeah. He's definitely a guy I want to give one more watch just to make sure I trust it.
Sure.
I'm just a little jaded. The Packers fan in me. We had, Ty Montgomery was the converted wide receiver thing.
Sure.
I was. You might appreciate this name. This is about as far back as I can go with.
This is the end of players. Marcus memory.
Yes. CJ Procise for Notre Dame.
Oh yeah,
was a wide receiver converted running back. I took him like way too early as a
as a fantasy football flyer.
So I saw a little bit of those guys watching Tracy, but
for sure.
Good shout. I'm gonna go with two guys I talked about in my running back rankings video that I'm not gonna do here just to not be redundant. But Kamani Vidal is my 5th ranked running back. I absolutely love Vidal, and Will Shipley, super explosive, really fun player.
We should talk about Shipley.
Okay, we can talk about Shipley.
I'm not a Shipley guy, and I know a lot of people like yourself who are. I think I understand your reasoning, and of course, after I've watched tape, done stats, and kind of arranged folks, then I'll go out and look at other people's lists to see, where I'm quote unquote weird, high or low. And a lot of people have Shipley fairly high up their list. Shipley is not in my ranked running backs list, and I only ranked. For the write-up for our draft rankings list that goes out on Bootleg, we say we do top 7, but for running backs, I'm always going to do 10 or 12. And he didn't even crack the sort of honorable mentions because I just think there are players in this draft that are a lot better than him. What do you love about Will Shipley?
Well, for one, it's like the floor in the receiving game, I think is exceptional. I think you see the way he runs angle routes out of the backfield. I think he's super, like his jump cut in space. He really like anticipates guys from the second level really well out in space. Like when he's catching a swing pass or in the screen game, I think he's going to be just a really reliable guy there. But you see that the vision from the second level shows up in his inside runs a lot, where he's seeing these safeties come and he's like setting up moves ahead of time. And he just kind of glides in between the tackles to the point that I saw enough from him for a guy that has his juice. I think I don't want to go as far as saying his vision is good, because there are times where he's just like running into the back of the offensive line and it's like,
yep, it happens.
Okay, we could bounce this one. So like, there's a little bit of that, but he is a true junior, and there might be a little bit you could coach into that. I also think if you put him in a wide zone offense where he's just kind of doing that, like the Shanahan thing a little bit more, I think he could potentially be unlocked a little bit more. So I don't think you're crazy for having him outside the top 12 or 13, just because it is that kind of like stylistic thing where if you want the more like real runners of the football, I could totally see that. But I just think he's going to be a really useful second running back for a while. My pro comp on him is one that people were not happy about, but I put down Reggie Bush. Pro NFL Reggie Bush.
I can see why people are upset about that. Yeah. So you didn't put down Tecmo Bowl Bo Jackson?
No.
You put down like post-injury Bo Jackson? No. Look, I get it. The thing that kills me is there's another player in this draft that all the things that get said about Shipley, I'm like, I think actually are that guy, but nobody's talking about that guy, and it's Blake Watson out of Memphis.
Oh, Blake Watson.
Oh, sorry. Who are you going to guess?
Well, I was going to guess the New Hampshire kid, Dylan Laub.
Oh, Laub, yeah.
Watson, go take it with Watson. I haven't watched him yet, but he's 100.
Watson is
he's the first guy on my watch list for this week. So we'll
get there, so 5'9", 200. So again, not the most imposing guy, but that's in my mind, that's functional size. There've been a lot of NFL running backs that are about that line. I'd like him to be 5 pounds heavier, but I'm not going to quibble. 1,000 yards, 5.9 yards carry. Added another 461 receiving on 50 receptions. Like that is first in class among running backs in this class. Yards per route run 1.51 second in this class among top backs. And like nobody's saying Blake Watson's name. And I'm like, look, I get it that he's not like super imposing, but you talk about the ability to run the ball, vision, bounce off tackles, even at that size. And look, the guy racked up over 1,000 yards, and it's not like it wasn't just a volume thing, right? It's still, we're talking about 6 yards a carry, basically, which to me is kind of about the floor you need in college to be considered as a functional high level NFL running back. But then you throw the receiving stuff on top, which is the first thing everybody talks about with Shipley. And I'm like, can I interest you in a Blake Watson for possibly less draft capital? I feel like a used car salesman.
Cool. Yeah, I'm really excited to watch him, and I could easily see me putting him right up there with him, just based on what you're saying and what I've heard some other people say too. So, cool. Let's shift to offensive line. Did you do a tackle and an interior player, or just
I did.
one?
I did both.
Okay.
And at typical bootleg fashion, I did multiples in case, who knows, you took the same guy or disagreed that player was going to be there after 100. For tackle, for me, it's Dominic Pooney out of Kansas. And it is possible because of his versatility, especially, but also his effectiveness to tackle, that he does go, say, in the 90s. So if we're going to get like super snippy about that, I would take Roger Rosengarten, who, again, 2 weeks ago easily was in the hundreds, and now he's kind of getting up there. Like, people are starting to appreciate, hey, there wasn't a lot of pressure in all those passing downs that came off the right side at Washington. Why was that? Oh, well, that was Roger Rosengarten. So if I've got a great offensive line coach, developer, I'd go even farther down the board and go for Patrick Paul out of Houston, because just tools, huge reach, some pretty good tape, but just not enough of it. And we talked about it with some other players. You want to see more consistency. But look, if I'm like the Tennessee Titans and now I've got Bill Callahan as my offensive line coach and Patrick Paul's sitting there in a, mid 100 round pick, I'm like, give me that guy, because I know I can get him ready. He's got tools like few other tackles in this class, and I'm really interested. He's going to be a little bit farther down. I think Pooney and Rosengarten, one could go ahead of the other. They both might go right at or right after the 100 mark. That's where I'd start. But again, if I have a great offensive line coach, which is a real force multiplier in my pocket as an organization, Patrick Paul is going to be squarely in my sights.
Yeah. All right. So I think Javon Foster is maybe the guy that, I think my tweet on him was like, he would have easily made a top 10 tackle list for me in a normal, tackle class. Really, really complete profile there. Like, loved his run blocking. I don't know. Did he test all that well? Like, because he moves really well, but I don't think
he tested pretty well. He's a very good athlete, and I'm with you on the run blocking. And when I saw the run blocking, you were talking about getting to Sinnott late. I got to Corey Schrader late. Okay. He was one of the, I only got to him like 10 days ago. And I was like, I love Corey Schrader. He's definitely in my ranked running backs list, but there's a lot of those blocks. And again, we see this out of Missouri all the time, because they're one of the few teams, I think, in college football that really specializes in a style. And that style is outside zone. And you're always going to get an outside zone runner out of Missouri. And Foster's out in front of a lot of those blocks. He has the athleticism to get out there. He's got the size. He is raw, but yes, if I, again, have an offensive line coach that likes those challenges and wants a guy with tools, Foster is, I think there's a bunch of them in this draft. Like, there's, we talked about Paul, we talked about Foster. There's a couple other guys down the board.
Delmar Glaze was the other guy I was going to talk about, who I think is like the classic, like, 6 man of the year type, where he can be, a very solid player, both tackles, both guards.
Yeah,
I do want to have. I have one more note.
120, about 120, 130. He's going to be there. That's another guy. There's sort of this bubble of like 4 or 5 good developmental guys right in the middle of the hundreds, and it's pick the one you like, pick the side that he played that you like, pick the one your coach thinks has the one measurable that they like. But there's a bunch of guys, if you need an OT3 to develop in this draft, that I'm kind of excited about in that mid 100 range.
Yeah, but I do have one point on Foster. Like, I have him. I totally agree with that group. Like all those names we just mentioned are in that group for me too. But I do have Foster at the top of that group because I think he's really close. When I saw the run blocking was as good as it was, I was really on board because at the Senior Bowl, I thought his hand usage was like some of the best we saw from the tackles out there. Just the way he protected his outside shoulder. Just I'm kind of the opinion, and maybe this is just from me when I was playing. Like I think accurate, strong hands is a lot harder to coach than the footwork. Just in my opinion. And I think Foster's feet are kind of where he needs the development. But if you can just get him to, anticipate like counters and move his feet a little bit quicker, I think you've got a great run blocker and a very good pass blocker too. So like, yeah, he's my 11th ranked tackle just outside the top 10 and might be there at like pick 105. So I had to give him a shout. Interior offensive line. I know you're a big Mason McCormick guy, but I don't know if he's going to be eligible for this video at this point.
He's not. That's the dream is Mason. And I wrote that down, that Mason McCormick is the dream, but it's not happening anymore. Like pre-Shrine Bowl, it might have happened. He was in the, 105, 95 range. It could have happened. I think solidly as people have gotten to his tape and dug in and really started to understand who he is as a player. And then he went to the combine. Turns out he's, a top like 20 guard all time in terms of RAS score. Like I had no idea he was that good of an athlete.
Right.
Love the makeup, love the production, love the thought process and getting to talk to him again. That interview went live like 4 hours ago on the channel. Go check it out. It's fascinating if you're interested in offensive line play, but I don't think it's happening, to be fair. Somebody asked me if I was comfortable with Chicago picking him at 75. And I was like 100%.
Yeah,
like,
he's there.
You have a guard. Yeah, you have a guard. You have a center. Like if any of your guys go down, you've got a guy that once I think he gets on the field, he's not leaving. So I'm totally happy with that. But if not, my backup plan is Zach Zinner out of Michigan. And there's 3 guys off the Michigan offensive line getting drafted this year. Zinner's actually one of my favorites. I don't think he'll be the first one drafted, but I do like his tools a little bit better. And look, how many times have we heard this story? Michigan offensive lineman drafted late, doesn't have to start right away, gets on the line, plays 7 years, gets re-signed. Like it happens all the freaking time. And I think Zach Zinner's next in line for that.
Yep. I had Hunter Nauerzad, which I think you probably knew I was going to put him because I was messaging you about him like a week after Shrine. I was like, hey, how did Hunter look down there in Dallas? Man, I think he's really good. Like, I don't see a huge difference in his tape from the other centers in this class, not named Jackson Powers Johnson. And maybe I'm crazy about not being the biggest guy on Zach Frazier, and I do have Frazier ahead of Nauerzad. But if what I'm getting at is give me Nauerzad at the top of the 4th round, then spending a top 35 pick on Frazier there. I think he moves well. I love his weight length combination. He's 6'3", 320 pounds. He's full sized, 33-inch arms though. So that's just like easy natural leverage. Not that 33-inch arms are the longest, but it's probably above average for centers. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, he flies off the ball in the run game, really complete player. So I'm a huge fan of his game.
I like his game, like his versatility. Got to talk to him. Didn't know it was him, actually. He was hanging out with Mason and Christian Mahogany. And I was like, oh, who's the third guy? And we were talking for like 15 minutes before. I was like, oh, that's Hunter. And I was like, oh. And then I thought back to all the things he said. And I was like, oh, I like the makeup there. He thinks about the game in the right way. I have a little bit of problem with his pass blocking. But again, coming out of Penn State, it's not going to be as polished as some of these other guys. I mean, some of these guys had insane pass block reps. Mahogany had 440 as an interior offensive liner. Cooper Beebe 449. Zach Frazier 447. Or sorry, those are run blocking. Jackson Powers Johnson 458 pass blocking snaps.
Yeah,
like Norzad had 386. It's up there, but they're not the cleanest. He's got to clean that up. But I think he's a guy that can do it. To your point, I like his tools and I like the value where he's probably going to go off the board. Well, maybe not anymore. Where he was going to go off the board a month ago, it was a dead solid lock. Yes, give me that guy. There's a really interesting. We talked about that group of tackles in the hundreds. I think there's a group of centers farther down.
Oh yeah,
that like Norzad, McMahon. You could put Limmer in there. He's slid a little bit. Bordellini, who had a great combine, like, and then Matt Lee from Miami, who's going to be even farther down, is like, I think about him like you think about Norzad. Like, sure. I really like Matt Lee, because if you watch pass rushers against Miami, like good ones, they have bad days. Like when you go back and like the Clemson guys, and you're like, oh man, I really like Rook, and yeah, he didn't really do much against Miami. Why is that? You go back, it's Matt Lee. Like Matt Lee is the reason. So again, not a great run blocker, and certainly doesn't necessarily look the part, Matt Lee, but like great pass blocker, one of the best pass blocking centers. There's 4 or 5 guys that if you need a center that maybe isn't going to start on day one, you can get them down the board in this draft. And that's not super common.
Yeah. It's I'm annoyed how well the draft is setting up for the Chicago Bears, EJ. It's not great.
Oh, we do love to annoy.
Whatever you need at 9, get your starting center in the 3rd, 4th round. It's gonna be like, God, man, the NFC North is gonna be fun. Yeah. All right, let's shift to defense. I know we're running a little long. I don't want to take up all your night here, but
that's all right.
Let's start with interior defensive line. Take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to take the pennies that other people drop, and that's T'Vondre Sweat. Look, he made a terrible choice off the field. I was actually in Austin when that happened. I had people texting me like, did you do? I was like, no, I was not drinking with T'Vondre Sweat. And again, if we're talking about this 2 months ago, you're probably not getting T'Vondre Sweat outside the top 100. He's 74 or something. Now, you might get him at 125. And again, if you're going to meet with the guy, talk about why it happened, and you're comfortable with that, some teams will be, some teams won't be, no matter what. I get that. If you're comfortable with that, you're getting a tremendous talent outside the top 100 if it's T'Vondre Sweat. If it's not, if you're one of those teams that can't handle that, I'm going to go after a guy like Dwayne Carter out of Duke. He can wait a little bit longer. And again, he's one of those guys a little bit like Jalen McMillan, that his 2022 tape, I mean, based on his 2022 tape, he was a top 50 player, like in the entire draft. 2023 wasn't as good, definitely regressed a little bit, whatever you want to say. Maybe wasn't surrounded by quite as much talent, whatever it was. 2023 didn't look anything like 2022, but as the old scout adage goes, we've seen him do it. We know he can. Like, if you can get 2022 out of Dwayne Carter, like pick at 125 or 130 is going to seem like an ultimate gift.
Yeah, that would explain the gap in where I view him. I was really underwhelmed, but I didn't go back to 2022. So maybe that I'll have to add that to my pre-draft watch list as well. Which is a big reason I wanted to do this, is because I want to, rescope
just
out.
Building your list. You're getting the crib notes. Go for it. Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. This was a really hard position group to come up with a name. I also had T'Vondre Sweat, because if he is falling, you got to do that. I guess, and I don't feel confident in this, but I kind of like Logan Lee out of Iowa as a 6th round pick, as a useful 3-tech. Nice swim move that he just is kind of breaking out in both phases. Like, he'll slip off blocks with it in the run game too. Some wins as a rusher. He had a good 3-cone out there, I believe it was. Yeah, I mean, 7.16 3-cone is one of, if not the best in the class. So just quick feet, slippery defensive tackle, Iowa dude. He has the right technique against the run. He's just not the biggest guy. So if you're looking for a base end, and if you want to run a bear front or whatever, 3-4 end type of dude, I think he's a useful player in the 6th round with a pretty high floor. So that's the name I went with. It's not super exciting, but it's a tough position group.
I have Lee as a defensive end, because I still do defensive tackle, defensive end, and edge. And to me, a defensive end is a guy that's going to play typically from 4I to 6, is going to be above 260 pounds, and is not going to be a guy typically that you're going to see drop into any kind of coverage. Kind of guy that has 490 snaps and had 10 of them in coverage. You're like, yeah, it's a defensive end. Logan Lee fits that almost to a T. Had a lot of pass rushing snaps, which was weird at Iowa. Led this class in assists. Didn't have a ton of production. Wasn't super efficient. But again, if you do the dirty work and you are that heavy base end and can set the edge against the run, you can play in the league for 7-8 years. We see this all the time. Guy gets 0 sacks or 2 cleanup sacks a year, but he sets the edge consistently and makes it a pain in the ass to run to his side. Like Logan Lee, we know he can do that. So I feel good about like the role. And if I can get him way down the board and he fills that sort of, hey, I got to get these snaps out of the way with somebody that could do it, Logan Lee could be that guy.
Yeah, like Margus Hunt would be like the guy that you're thinking of. That's been on a team for 10 years and plays like 5 snaps a game. All right, let's do, I guess, edge. So, you described your difference in positional terminology there, but guys that are screaming off the edge, getting off after the quarterback, who'd you go with there?
Yeah, the dream is that Austin Booker slides. I don't think, again, that's happening. A month ago, yeah, I think that was a legitimate thing that maybe he gets to 100. I don't think that's happening anymore. In fact, I think he could go as early as about 45, which means he's really not getting to 100. In that case, I'm going for Mo Camara from Colorado State. And again, if he gets pipped in the top 100 because somebody loves him, Javonte Jean-Baptiste from Notre Dame is a guy that I really like. I think he kind of got overlooked. He transferred in. He's got a lot of skills. Again, he's not going to have super flashy sack numbers. He's always been overshadowed by players he played with when he was at Ohio State and even at Notre Dame that were a little bit flashier in terms of guys getting to the quarterback, but he's got really good size. He, again, plays with heavy hands, can set the edge, and he is athletic when he does get free. He doesn't get free all that often, but when he does, he can run people down. He's not slow. So a guy that's getting a little bit overlooked, I think, because of like when and where he transferred, sort of in the process, but very talented player that, again, if I have we were talking about with the offensive line, if I have a defensive line developer and they're looking at those tools, like that's a guy that I'll take a late round flyer on.
Yeah. I wasn't as high on him. I was a little turned off by the 6-year thing with him. I wrote down that he kind of plays like a power rusher a lot of times, but he should be playing like a speed rusher. There's a lot of bull rush, a lot of rip moves, and he's just not creating a lot of movement. So maybe if you, like you said, you can get him with the right coach, but at that point it's like, well, you've been at 2 programs, you're a 6-year player. I do like his run defense tape. I like the dirty work stuff that you said about him. Yeah, but I was definitely lower on him. I'm going to go with Xavier Thomas out of Clemson, another 6-year player. But God, he's got a very interesting background. Just has had a tough time with injuries and the COVID year, and just it's been. I mean, this dude was like the #1 prospect in his year, next to maybe Trevor Lawrence. I think that might have been the same class, but dude, he reminds me a lot of is Josh Uche for the Patriots. Just that screamer off the edge. He will threaten with speed around the edge, and then he's got inside counters. He's got an inside spin move and swipes and swims to get inside and beat you that way. I thought he puts up his best effort against the run. He's not the biggest guy, but as a stand-up edge, I think he's going to be a factor there. You can drop him into coverage, and there was little flashes of the bull rush in there too. Just these are the types of traits that you're just not usually finding at the end of the 3rd, 4th round. And because of his long path and injury red flags, you're probably able to get him around that 100 mark. So had to shout him out. Just missed my top 10 edge rusher list.
That's the reason is the injuries, and a lot of teams are hoping he slides. Like I've talked to several scouts, and I was like, so who do you like? Who are you looking at? And like more than one of them has said, Xavier Thomas, real interested in this, both pre and post combine, because we were at combine when he ran and he came up limping from both of his 40s. And I was like, oh, damn it. Like he ran pretty well, but that's the thing that everybody didn't want to see, because again, what you talked about, if this guy is, injury free, which is not the case, he's a top 15 or 20 player in the class he comes out in. Like he has that kind of talent, and it's just this, I can't stay healthy and whatever else. But there's a lot of teams who haven't forgotten that tape. Like many who are just like, how far does he got to go before we just take a flyer on the trades?
Yeah, for sure. All right. Off ball linebacker. This is I think the hardest position once you get into day 3 to actually have strong opinions on, honestly, because you're really just gambling on the human that they're going to put in the work to learn this position that has become. I have gone as far as saying it's like right next to quarterback in terms of the hardest position to play in the National Football League. So who'd you go with here?
I'm going to flip the script and make you go first on this one because I have my guy, but I'm going to make you go first and then I'll follow up.
All right. I'll go with JT Bertrand out of Notre Dame.
Okay.
Did you watch him?
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Like,
yeah,
you're gambling on
I know
at that point. Like, he's the lesser of the two Notre Dame linebackers, and I actually didn't really like either one of them.
Yeah, okay. I disagree. I liked him better. I liked him better than the other guy. So he didn't test. That's the thing. So we don't have those testing numbers on him. I think he would have tested pretty well. I think he moves really well, really fluid, bends in and out of blocks, pretty good sideline speed on tape. I would have loved to get that 40 time to know what it is.
Sure.
But just, when he blitzes, it reminded me of Drew Tranquill a lot. Another Notre Dame guy, but just his burst after the quarterback, his instincts as a blitzer. I think he flashed enough in coverage, which is for a day 3 linebacker. That's like all you're looking for. So I'll go with him. I'm not going to be like, standing on the table like we got.
No, you're not going to be pounding. Bertrand, you might be tapping on the table.
Yeah.
But, I will take a page out of your book and go back and watch him again because I watched him a long time ago and I was like, don't think he's really going to make my list, but I will go back and take another look.
Yeah.
My guy is Cedric Gray out of UNC. Guy I saw really early, and I thought, hey, he's really good. And in the middle of the process, as often happens, starting to have these conversations. I was already pretty set with and everybody was like, you're nuts. He's not going to like 150, 160. I was like, really? I don't think that's true. And so I would go back to his tape. Like, he was my sort of secret, like, watch late night when I had one more tape. I was like, I'm going to go back and watch a little more Gray because everybody says I'm wrong about him. And I cannot get off. And this happened to me, strangely enough, with another UNC guy. And I don't really have any ties to UNC, but last year was Josh Downs. Josh Downs is a guy that I kept feeling like, I've got him too high. I got to get him out of my top, whatever. Go back. And I was like, nope, I'm going to be committed. Josh Downs is my guy. And this year it's Cedric Gray. He is a balanced linebacker, which is, again, tough to find in this class. You can find a lot of traits, kind of like tight end, which is odd because it's, the defensive mirror of that in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But Gray had, he's a good tackler. He had a low missed tackle rate, not the lowest, had big plays in him, forced fumbles. In terms of like quarterback hits, he had a bunch of those. And in coverage, he is capable. Again, when you're talking about a day 3 linebacker, he had 379 coverage snaps, which is more than actually the number 1 amount of coverage snaps in top inside linebackers in this class. And, his NFL passer rating against was 79. Like that's not great. That's not profitable to throw at. And 3 PBUs as well. So an active linebacker and pass coverage, which is really the role middle linebacker has to play, or else you're just going to be targeted relentlessly. It's like, middle school bullying. Like defensive coordinators are going to be like, can't pass cover, throw at that guy until we get him out of the game. Like Cedric Gray will hold up if that's the case. And I've started to see him just in the last 2 weeks, creep back up to a level that I think is pretty commensurate for his talent. And I'm glad that I didn't pitch him off the cliff early on when people were like, you're nuts. He's not going to get. I think he is. I think he's one of the more complete linebackers in this draft. I like his game.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even consider him because I do have a 3rd round grade on him. So I guess I didn't.
And you're not alone.
Where he's supposed to go as opposed to where I would draft him. So I think you nailed I saw everything you saw there.
That's cool.
All right. Yeah. Let's go cornerback. Can I go first again? Because I don't.
Absolutely. I would love to let you go first because this is a haystack position in this draft. It is equally bad as wide receiver because I feel like after the first maybe 5 guys, you could literally flip a coin for what your team needs for the next 15 guys. And there's a lot of talent in there.
I love. And this was tough for this exercise because I don't know which one of these guys are going to be there in the 4th because there's so many of them. But any name that I pick, you could definitely be like, yeah, he's not going to be there in the 4th. So it was tough. The one guy that I do think will be there in the 4th is, and this is kind of a gamble on traits, but Decemerion Richardson out of Mississippi State.
Yep.
Ran a 4.34. Just the type of traits that you want to gamble on day 3. And there's a bunch of those dudes in this draft. The SEC corners that tested really well. He was the guy where I actually saw like the anticipation, this like the snappy like route squeeze, like the really the flashes of the really special movement, like the oily hips and the speed and the coverage ability. And he's a willing run defender, just not a great one yet. So I did want to shout him out because I do think he'll be there in the 4th, but there's so many guys like, I don't know where Max Melton's going to go. I don't know where Jeremiah Pritchett's going to go. Renardo Green, Khyree Jackson, like is Lassiter going to fall? There's so many guys that are going to be in that like 70 to 100 range that are really good football players. I think that's the sweet spot with this cornerback class.
There's certainly a lot to choose from. Khyree Jackson is the guy that if he slides, he's on my list. 6'2", 6'3" out of Oregon, started at Alabama, sticky man coverage corner, can play press. Has good length. The speed is not the best, but he's not slow. And you add it to his length, and boy, it's hard to throw over him. He makes himself a real problem in coverage. If he was not there, Tykee Smith for me is a corner, and I don't know why more people aren't sort of.
He's my number one safety, EJ.
Well, the funny thing is, he's not a safety.
He's
not a safety.
But neither was Javon Holland.
Well, a Javon Holland,
like mostly slot corner.
Right. And Tykee Smith spent like the majority, and I mean well more than 3/4 of his snaps in the slot.
Yeah.
Like he's a slot corner, and he's a great one. So he's way up on my corner rankings. He's a CB. He's a beast. Like if they let him out of the top 100, he is mine in a heartbeat. I want that guy. Philly native, absolute dog, run defender, both willing and able. Has like his pass against stats are ridiculous. Like the average depth of completion is like 6.5 yards or something. Like he is not letting you get a damn thing. And I love it. And that's at Georgia. Like this is not, low level competition. Love Tykee Smith. Another couple names to shout out. Chris Abrams-Drain. If he slides outside, love his game. His frame is not awesome. But again, if you're outside the top 100, you're giving up something. But he plays much bigger than his frame indicates. And he's very effective too. Again, not just a willing guy, but a skilled one. And then I need to ask you about one player. This whole podcast is a dramatic setup for one player that I need to know if you've even looked into. And it's Elijah Jones from BC.
I haven't watched him yet.
Okay, do me a favor. Watch Elijah Jones. Just tell me what you think of a tape grade for him. Look at his stats. Look at his physical profile and tell me what you think of Elijah Jones. And then pick your brain and see if anybody has mentioned him. And the difference between those two plateaus, I bet you, is a big one.
He had to pull out of the Senior Bowl, right? Or was he out there? I can't remember.
I don't know if he was at senior. I know he was invited. There's some weirdness. There's some mystery there. This is a very good dude, academic All-American, strong family, was a track star in high school, has like elite tape and measurements.
6'1.5".
Yeah, he's a 4'4" guy.
42.5-inch vert, nearly 11-inch broad jump. Yeah, dude's a freak.
Yeah, and here's
definitely gonna watch him.
And like also plays extremely well. You're gonna listen to this. You're gonna be like, wait, that's not possible. So Elijah Jones, if you throw at him, his NFL passer rating, if you throw at him, is 18.1.
Jesus,
that's like dropping the ball and kicking it backwards. Like that's not even a thing. I think if you pick it up and set it down, it's like 30. So, and his reception percentage allowed is 32.5%. He had 5 picks. He's got all those traits and speed. Nobody's saying a word about it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
interesting.
Something's good. And he's good kid, strong kid, great family, academic All-American at Elite 11. Like he checks like every single box you'd want from a corner. Played in a good conference, I don't know why nobody's
Okay.
talking about him. He's amazing, and there's something going on because a guy like that doesn't slip through the cracks.
Well, we're putting the watch list together, EJ.
That's right.
I'll bump them up.
You have yours. I have mine.
Yeah.
JD Bertrand.
Yep. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Tykee Smith. That's a good transition to safeties for me. I mean, my safety rankings are a little different. I'm going to start with this position group.
Go for it.
That's okay.
Absolutely. Dude, it's your
so
podcast.
I have tied with like 1A, 1B situation.
Okay.
I have Malik Mustafa and Tykee Smith. Love both these players' floors. I mean, you nailed it with Tykee Smith. I would go a step further and say I think if you asked him to, I think he could play deep safety. I don't really see
totally could.
Yeah. I don't see what would be missing there. He's got great speed. You mentioned some of the coverage stats. Like, this was the question I wanted to ask you and kind of put you on the spot here. Maybe this is easier for you than it is for me.
Go ahead.
But you need a slot corner. Would you rather have him or Mike Sainristil still?
I would absolutely take Tykee Smith.
Yeah, I think.
And I love Sainristil still. Like, people are like, oh, that's a shot against Mike. No, Mike is an amazing player. Like, he was a wide receiver up till 2 years ago. He is still developing as a young corner and already played at a high level. Plus, he's got all the off-field intangible stuff. People talk about how he elevated that program as a leader. I've seen it on the field. I was 3 feet away from this guy at the combine while he was doing his long jump, and he was talking to Rich Eisen. Like, Mike is a great and still developing player. He has ceiling to reach, and he's already very good. Tykee Smith is better in every category right now, and it's not close besides national championships. Like, I would take Tykee Smith in a heartbeat. And that's the thing, is like you said, oh, I think he could play safety. I think he could play safety too, but this is very much like a tackle guard debate, right? I think he could be an all-pro, you call it a box safety. I think he could be an all-pro deep safety probably if you wanted. Well, not all-pro. I think he could be Pro Bowl at those. I think he can be a starting all-pro candidate at nickel. Yeah. Like, in his first year, he's that kind of player. So I don't want to move that anywhere. I want to put him in a position where, look, he's in the base defense. Nickel's the new base, has been for years in the NFL. And you're going to give him the opportunity to influence like every play because he's right near the line of scrimmage. Like, give me that for that particular player.
The pro comp I wrote down for him is Antoine Winfield Jr. in parentheses, at least as a slot cornerback.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think the floor is like because the Bucs play Antoine in the slot a lot, and he does all of the things we've described. So I think Tykee and the physical, if you do the RAS compare, it's like very, very similar. So had to mention him. Who's another safety you want to talk about? Throw a name out.
Robert Taylor-Demerson. I don't know that he's going to make 100 anymore out of Texas Tech. Again, another guy we interviewed at the Shrine Bowl, but has I don't want to say unique, but a rare skill set where he is equally good doing deep safety stuff, and the snaps reflect that, but also is very impactful in the slot, both as a rusher, as a run defender. You don't find that balance. Usually guys that play the deep third really, really well. Think about Kalen Bullock in this class. It's really good as that center fielder. Not a guy I want really close to the line of scrimmage, not an impactful defender. Rabbit is both, and I think because of that, he will go above the top 100. If that's the case, I want Cole Bishop out of Utah. I think he is a way underrated safety in this group. Very, very good player. Again, much in the mold of Rabbit, not physically, but in terms of impact. Both he and Sione Vake had a bunch of pressures. Cole's, again, NFL passer rating against is really low. He can get sideline to sideline. He is not a flyer necessarily, but I think he has really good functional speed. Reminds me of a guy like a young Kevin Byard, who was not a burner, but because he knew where he was going and got there in a hurry, like you didn't really see the speed be a problem for him.
Yeah.
I think Cole Bishop is very similar to that, and he will be there in the hundreds, and I would take it. In fact, 122 to Chicago.
You think he will be?
I think he probably will be. He's gaining steam, but again, like you said, Malik Mustafa's getting a lot of leverage. Some folks really love Cameron Kinchins. Like, it's just pick your flavor. So if they don't pick Cole and he's sitting there at 122 and the Bears haven't done anything else in safety, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, really good young player, super fluid, good anticipation. For some reason, the ball skills just or not the ball skills, but the ball production just hasn't been there for him yet. but you don't watch his tape and say that's for any reason other than, well, he's just the guys he's covering are not open. So it's like the quarterbacks aren't throwing at him. So I like Cole Bishop. I have a second round grade on him. So I'm a big fan. All right, EJ, that was a blast, man. Thank you for being generous with your time. We'll skip the fullbacks and the kickers and the punters. For,
I know. I fully admit this is not a special teams podcast. We like other folks can look at punters and kickers. They are players too. They are important. That's not the dirty work I'm going to do at this time of year. So have at it. But no, I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity. It's really, I appreciate the chance to come on and to do something fun and lighthearted at this point in the draft season. That is a welcome relief.
Absolutely. All right. Everybody, thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys throughout the draft process here. And definitely, of course, head over to Bootleg and follow along with their live stream and all the content they got going on too. So we'll see you guys later. Peace out.